indicated you had already known what you wanted to go into. Did any of the fiction you read influence not so much where you went, but how you went?
Yeah, it actually did. There's fiction and events. Specifically, in high school, I really wanted to be a radio astronomer. I thought that's what I wanted to do. I really wanted to be a physicist, astronaut, that sort of thing. And I wanted to look into cosmology and those things. I still do a lot. And like I said, one of my master's degrees is in astronomy. And I read Carl Sagan's book Contact when I was a junior in high school. And I really liked the book from the science, hard science in the science fiction aspect. I wasn't real crazy about some of the politics in it, but that's another story. And so it kind of, the book Contact is really based around radio astronomy, and it sort of got me in the direction of making a radio telescope. And that's what led me to make the radio telescope. But as I progressed in my understanding of the world, and that was about the time, it was 1986 when I graduated high school, the height of the Cold War, the very peak of the thing, at sort of the second climax of it. The first climax was in the 50s and 60s, but this is where Reagan had come up and was really putting his best foot forward to try and end the Cold War. And SDI was really hitting big and heavy, and North Alabama, Huntsville, was really a big part in the directed energy, particle beam weapons studies and so on. And my next door neighbor, who was a scientist, electrical engineer from Auburn, actually, War Eagle again, who was working at SDIO at the time, helped me build that radio telescope. And when I won the state competition, the first place prize was you could go work, it was a job for the summer to work with the Army at any position that they had open for that, the high school age kids. And my boss, no, he became my boss, my friend, that mentor that helped me out with the radio telescope said, "You ought to come work in our lab with me. I'd love to have you." And so I went that summer and worked with him, and loved working on the directed energy weapons, loved working on science for a purpose, to save our guys, to defend our way of thinking, our way of life. And that really, ever since then, it's one of those things I tell, like my older brother. He just won the Air Force General Lewis Allen trophy. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but he is an enlisted, I think he just got promoted to E8, or he's in the line to get promoted to E8. He's C-130 crew chief. He's done 2 tours in the Middle East, in Iraq, Horn of Africa, Afghanistan. Because the Air Force, they go into all of them from one place. And at any rate, I always tell him that he's the one that had the courage. So I was going to do what I could do, at least to support that. I didn't have enough courage to join the military, apparently, but I did other things that I think were useful, but not quite as the front line kind of useful. So anyway, doing the DE work that summer with my soon-to-be long-term mentor, as opposed to just my short-term high school mentor, really opened my eyes to a different sort of moral imperative, a moral drive to do what I was doing. And that's around the time that I started rereading Starship Troopers. And it all sort of amalgamated into the personality that I would end up becoming. And another thing happened. When I was 17, 18, about the same time frame. I was working that summer, actually, so I was 17. Carl Sagan came to Huntsville to give a presentation. And it could have been a very, very good presentation. It could have been a lot of fun had he talked about fun things. The Cosmos series was real popular at the time and all that. And what he did instead in his presentation was he came to Huntsville and he proceeded to insult all the engineers and scientists in North Alabama that decided to work for the military, and started using it as a forum to espouse his political views. And he started making fun of the SDIO, the SDI, but the Strategic Defense Initiative, Ronald Reagan, and went so far as to say that he came to Huntsville where they had built the rockets that went to the moon, a town full of rocket scientists and engineers, hoping to hear one great question. And people lined up and asked him questions all through the thing. And he said that, of course, his whole spiel was that SDI could not end the Cold War, and that the only thing that would end the Cold War would be for us to do put down our swords and do a joint manned mission to Mars with the Soviets. And so he continued on as his way of insulting the locals by talking about how stupid the questions were as they were asked. And at the end of the presentation he gave, he actually said, "I did not get that one good question tonight." And I was in line. I had a good question. I'd just come back from that summer of working, and in the last week we went to Washington, D.C., all the students that worked that summer, and to present our project reports to the folks that had funded the program. It was a summer high school program kind of thing. And so I went up there and presented my presentation on the laser that I'd worked on all summer. It was so cool. And General Abramson, the director, the guy for Strategic Defense Initiative, gave a lecture to us and came out and talked to us. Talked about how we needed a broad scope of ideas to overcome the Cold War. How we needed to do diplomatic things like space missions. We needed to do other things, humanitarian missions with the rest of the world. But at the same time, we needed to have a strong resolve and a defense system that would make their offensive weapons obsolete. Thought it was brilliant. You see a dichotomy in the philosophies here that I'm getting at. Well, so I was in line to ask Carl Sagan a question. I was going to say, well, I just saw Abramson say last week that we ought to have a big scope of things, a wider view of this, and not put all our eggs in one basket, not just SDI, not just a manned mission to Mars, not just whatever, not just politics. And I was going to ask that question. The guy in front of me asked the question, Mr. Sagan, or Dr. Sagan, how's Johnny Carson, and have you seen him lately? And I wanted to strangle the guy, yeah. And so at that point, Sagan, clowned around with the guy a little bit, asked the question, and then that was the last question he took. And I was right there by the mic. And so then I went down the standing line, got my book autographed, and was walking out to the car. And at the time, a North Alabama thunder shower hit. It was thundering and lightning, and the rain was pouring down. And as I was making my way to the car, I was real disappointed with Carl Sagan. And he had been sort of an idol from watching him on TV and so on. And so what I did was, I was kind of in a pouting mood. Here's a guy that I thought was a real cool guy, and this is the way he was reacting to the world, and it was sort of an eye opener. And then I see his limo pull around front, and here he comes with a chauffeur walking across from the arena with holding an umbrella for him, and Carl Sagan's under the umbrella, and they're walking. And so I kind of rushed over and then started walking up slowly so I didn't look too much like fanboy. And I said, Dr. Sagan, I think I have your one good question. And he said, okay, you have 30 seconds. I said, well, I just heard a lecture from General Abramson talking about SDI and the way to end the Cold War and befriend the Russian people. And it was more of not put all of our eggs in one basket. And we still needed to defend ourselves with a strategic defense initiative. The economic aspects of it will cause them to counterspend it as an economic aspect of it. There is then the potential of other things, diplomatic and even joint space missions, like you say. Sagan looked at me and did like he was deflated. That's nonsense. SDI could never work. It's ridiculous. The only way to do that is a manned mission to Mars. I still didn't get the one good question. Stepped in the car, chauffeur closed the door, and they drove off. And here I was, 17 years old, standing there. He could have made an opportunity right there to have a fan for life if he would have handled that properly. Instead, he created an anti-fan. I'm an extreme Carl Sagan anti-fan. And at that point, here I was, 17 years old, and standing in the parking lot, and the rain, it got worse. It started just pouring down. My friends were over in my car with the windows cracked, yelling at me, "Get out of the rain, you idiot!" and so, those are events you see that shaped me into sort of doing what one of the things I'm doing today. I was in the private industry for about 8 years. After 12 and a half years of civil service with the Army, I went into the private sector just due to budget, moving around and things, and so I could get to a broader scope as well. But it was harder for me to work to improve the shareholders' portfolio than it was for a moral imperative. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that the American system and having the shareholders and capitalism, all that is exactly what the world needs and the way it needs to work. It's just from a personal standpoint, I preferred to work where every day what I was doing was for the moral imperative, not for making more money for the partners.